So I'd signed a 3-year deal. In my mind, it was always a 3-year deal with West Coast Fever. I had no intention of going anywhere. And there was a opt-out clause for either party. And as I said, my full intention was to stay. And it wasn't until reading it after that there was actually meant to be a month's notice from either party if that was the case.
It's an employment contract, effectively.
Yeah. I was told one day before the contract expired that I was not wanted by the club and did not see it coming at all. I ended up actually so we'd played in that grand final. I remember on the Monday, because what happens is the league puts out a list at the end of the season of all the players who are off contract to all the clubs, so then the clubs know who they can approach. And I started getting some messages from some of the coaches of other clubs, and it was just, bad luck and blah, blah, if you're not sure what you're doing next year. And I was like, I'm playing for West Coast Fever, like, whatever. And what is this? I'm like, this is a bit weird. And then a few days later, we had the awards dinner, Fever Awards dinner, and I knew that one of the other girls, because with the contracts, there's generally there was only like 3 shooters that were signed, and Janelle had signed, and that night I found out one of our younger shooters had signed a 1-year deal. And then the next morning after the awards dinner, I got a text message from one of the players, a player in Melbourne, just going, I've heard Alice Teague-Neal, who's at the club now, has signed with Collingwood. And I was like, what? I'm like, what's going on? Like, this is just all weird. And so I ended up basically piecing it together myself that a meeting that I was having with the club on the Thursday evening was to them to tell me that they weren't going to continue with me the following year.
How was that meeting?
Oh, it was horrible. And as I said, because it was just the way in which it was done to give me 1 day. And during that week, clubs were signing people. So I literally was then without a job.
Right. Because people had the jump on you effectively because you weren't looking for another job. So I had and most of the clubs had started filling up all their lists. So, it was horrible. And just, as I said, because I had no idea, I'd bought a house a few months earlier over here, and just had no idea what I was going to do because there was no forewarning that it was coming. That reeks of unprofessionalism by the club. So 2018 is the year that the salary cap breaching scandal, whatever you want to call that, happens.
Yep.
Is that all intertwined? Sounds like management didn't have their shit together.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that was the thing afterwards, because I was like, well, if it was after if money was an issue, why was that never discussed? I would have been, and I'm not just saying this, I would have been okay to take a pay cut if that's something that was needed. But yeah, and then obviously afterwards you found out that there was a salary cap breach, which had started in 2018. So it was all a complete balls up. Oh, I didn't know that. Obviously, as a player, I've got no idea what dollars and cents.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Not did you know? Because I assume it's like any other sport. Players don't know what's going on with the books. But what about on reflection then? What's that sort of knowing that the club was effectively forging the books and paying people what they shouldn't have been paying? What's that feel like as a player who was involved at the time? And you know a lot of players that were too.
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. And yeah, it's obviously incredibly disappointing. And I think, looking back now, particularly the girls who were still there and had been involved in those subsequent years, because they ended up losing, because a lot of those deals were external employment things and
additions,
and other additions that hadn't then been signed off on or been put forward to the league. So then those players ended up losing out on what they thought were genuine job opportunities and that were all above board, additional money that they thought they would have been earning for then the following year when they still had a contract in place. So yeah, it's not great, and it obviously puts a few question marks over your intention of why you would stay around, a business that then is doing that to their players.
Yeah. It was kind of weird. Yeah.
I was just saying, so, I mean, it's sort of easy in hindsight to look back and be like, I'm glad I didn't stay around at that time. But do you feel that? Like, that you sort of got lucky in that you didn't get involved in that sort of whole?
Dare I say, I'm relieved in a lot of ways we didn't win the grand final. Knowing that, because if we had, you would expect that the league would have stripped the grand final off the club, and at the end of the day, it's the players, and to have had that happen, that would have just been absolutely horrible because. Said what you go through to win a premiership and sometimes it takes a bloody long time for that to happen. I think that's probably a big relief that we didn't win that grand final looking back.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because that you would have been stripped of it, no doubt.
Oh, no doubt. And a lot of people even sit there and question if the penalty was harsh enough for...
What was the penalty again?
It was a few $100,000. Some of that, I think half of that was suspended. They then got 300, yeah, and they got deducted
12
points. But they still ended up keeping. They made finals that year. Fever got to keep the same. Year? Yep, they got to keep. The season that they got deducted 12 points, they'd made that up within the first sort of four.
Is it 4 points? It's 4 points a win.
4 points for a win. Yeah. So they were then, and they made finals that year. Whereas I think it was at Melbourne Storm, they also then had to completely change their playing list. So a lot of people were wondering whether or not, they still kept the same team.
Yeah.
Was it severe enough? I don't know.